My name is Elise Rowan, and suddenly, the life I built was exposed under bright lights. If you've ever felt betrayal land without warning, this story is for you. Tell me where you're watching from, and hit subscribe, because what happened next changed everything. The room was loud in that polished, expensive way, glass clinking, laughter pitched just high enough to sound successful, the city glowing behind the windows like it was applauding us. New Year's Eve in Scottsdale always feels staged, like everyone's performing a better version of themselves before midnight erases the year. I stood near the edge of the rooftop, my champagne untouched, my hand resting lightly on my daughter's shoulder as she leaned against me, bored and blinking at the lights. My husband took the microphone. That alone wasn't unusual. He liked speeches. He liked being seen as the man who built things. Investors quieted. Friends turned. Phones lifted just a little, casually, as if no one wanted to admit they were recording. I smiled out of habit, the way you do when you've learned how to support without needing credit. He cleared his throat. Before the countdown, he said, I just want to thank the people who made this year possible. I felt my daughter straighten. She knew what came next. She expected to hear my name. He thanked his partners. He thanked his parents. He thanked the team. Each word landed exactly where it should have. Then he paused, smiled wider, and looked across the room, not at me, not at our daughter, but at a woman standing near the bar. And most of all, he said, lifting his glass, I want to thank the woman who stood by me when things got hard, who believed in me when I doubted myself. I couldn't have done this without you. He said her name, not mine. The room didn't gasp. It went quiet in a way that felt deliberate, like everyone had collectively decided not to breathe. I felt my daughter's fingers tighten around my wrist. The woman flushed, laughed softly, and raised her glass back at him. Someone clapped. One person, then another. Unsure, polite. The sound echoed, awkward and thin. I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. I watched the faces instead. The ones that flicked toward me and away too fast. The ones that froze, calculating. The ones that already knew. My husband kept talking. He tried to smooth it over, adding something vague about support and loyalty, but the damage was done. Words don't undo what's already been heard. My daughter looked up at me. Her eyes weren't confused. They were searching. Mom, she whispered. I leaned down and kissed the top of her head. My mouth tasted like metal. We're leaving, I said quietly. I took her hand and walked. No rush, no tears. The elevator ride felt longer than it was. The doors closed, sealing in the echo of music and chatter and a year that no longer belonged to me. My phone vibrated before we reached the lobby. I didn't look. Outside, the air was cool, clean, indifferent. Fireworks cracked somewhere in the distance. People cheered. A countdown started, muffled and offbeat. Did Dad mean? My daughter began. I know what he meant, I said. My voice surprised me. Steady, calm, like it belonged to someone else. We got into the car. I buckled her in. She watched me carefully, the way children do when they sense something permanent has shifted. I didn't cry on the drive home. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. At a red light, my phone buzzed again. His name lit up the screen. I let it ring until it stopped. When we pulled into the driveway, the house looked exactly the same. Lights on. Decorations still up. A banner inside that said, Cheers to us. My idea. Ordered weeks ago. I stood there for a moment, keys in my hand, and felt something settle in my chest. Not sadness. Not even anger. Clarity. I tucked my daughter into bed without changing her clothes. She asked if Dad was coming home. I told her not tonight. She nodded like she already knew the answer. Are we okay? She asked. I brushed her hair back. We will be. She fell asleep, holding my hand. In the kitchen, I finally checked my phone. Missed calls. Messages stacked one on top of the other. It's not what it looked like. You left before I could explain. Please call me. I deleted them without opening anything else. At midnight, fireworks lit the sky. I watched them through the window, alone, my reflection staring back at me. 12 years of marriage reduced to a toast that thanked the wrong woman. I didn't feel broken. I felt done. I thought about the way he'd looked past me, the way he'd said her name with confidence, the way he hadn't even checked where I was standing before he spoke. Betrayal isn't always a secret. Sometimes it's delivered with a microphone and a smile. I turned off the lights one by one. In the bedroom, his side of the closet hung full and untouched. I didn't slam doors. I didn't throw anything. I sat on the edge of the bed and made a quiet promise to myself. He had chosen his moment. I would choose what came next. I lay down fully dressed and stared at the ceiling until the fireworks faded and the new year arrived without him. Somewhere across town, he was probably trying to explain himself, trying to rewind time. I didn't want explanations. I wanted resolution, and I already knew exactly how to get it. People think betrayal comes out of nowhere. It doesn't. It grows quietly, fed by small compromises you explain away because facing them feels harder than surviving them. I met my husband 12 years earlier, when his ambitions still fit inside a notebook. He talked fast, dreamed big, and made promises that felt earnest because he believed them at the time. I had my own career then, my own momentum, but I believed in partnership. Not the romantic kind people post about, but the real one. Shared risk, shared reward. When he decided to pivot into real estate, I was the one who ran the numbers. I helped him structure the first deal, proofread proposals late at night, hosted dinners he couldn't be bothered to plan. When we couldn't afford help, I became it. I didn't need my name on the company. I needed stability. I needed us. Our daughter was born during his second year in business. I learned how to balance feedings with spreadsheets, school pickups with investor calls. I stepped back publicly so he could step forward professionally. That wasn't sacrifice to me then. That was alignment. The money came slowly at first, then faster. Properties multiplied. His confidence followed. People started listening when he spoke. He started traveling more. Conferences, site visits, quick trips that turned into late nights. I noticed the changes before I named them. The phone turned face down. The way he stepped outside to take calls he used to take in front of me. How he laughed at messages and then tucked the phone away when I entered the room. I asked once lightly, like you're supposed to when you don't want to sound suspicious. "Everything okay?" I said. "Of course," he replied, too fast. "Just work." I wanted to believe him because belief was easier than confrontation. We had a child, a mortgage, intertwined finances, a reputation. You don't tear those things open unless you're ready for what spills out. There were other signs. A woman's name mentioned casually, always in a professional context. A colleague who seemed to show up in more stories than necessary. He started dressing differently for trips. New shirts, new cologne. When I commented, he smiled and said, "Am I not allowed to look good?" I laughed, because that's what wives do when they don't want to become the problem. By the time the money was substantial, the stakes were real. Our assets weren't theoretical anymore. The house, the accounts, the college fund. The company, his on paper but supported by my unpaid labor and financial planning. I knew exactly where everything was. I also knew how exposed I would be if things went wrong. The first real crack came 6 months before New Year's. He missed our daughter's school performance, said he was stuck in traffic. Later, I saw a photo online, him at a networking event, arm around someone just out of frame. I showed him the photo. He didn't apologize. He sighed. "You're reading too much into things," he said. "Why are you trying to start something?" That sentence landed harder than any accusation could have. It told me where the line was. It told me who he was protecting. Still, I stayed. Not because I was weak, but because I was calculating. I needed certainty before I made a move. Emotion without proof is how women lose everything. The proof didn't come from him. It came from my sister. She called me 2 days after New Year's, her voice careful. I didn't want to say anything without being sure, she said. But I saw them. Together. Not at a work thing. I didn't ask where. I didn't ask when. I didn't need details to understand the truth. I took a picture, she added quietly. In case you need it. I closed my eyes and felt the last thread snap. Later that night, my daughter asked why Dad hadn't come home yet. I told her he was busy. She didn't believe me. He talks different now, she said. Like he's not really here. Children notice everything adults pretend not to. When my husband finally walked in after midnight, smelling like someone else's perfume, he tried to kiss my cheek. I stepped back. What's wrong? He asked, rehearsed concern ready. I looked at him. Really looked. The man I'd protected, elevated, believed in. I know, I said. He froze. Know what? He asked. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I turned away and felt something solidify inside me. This wasn't just about betrayal. This was about years of shared effort, shared risk, and a future he'd decided to gamble without my consent. The marriage was over. What remained was leverage. And I intended to use all of it. Shock is loud. Decision is quiet. The morning after I said, I know, I woke up before the sun, before regret could soften anything. My husband was asleep on the other side of the bed, turned away from me, breathing like nothing had changed. I didn't wake him. I didn't confront him again. There was nothing left to extract from a conversation. I took my phone into the kitchen and made a list. Not of feelings, of actions. I started with the documents. Years of habit kicked in. I opened the cloud folders I'd organized myself. The ones he forgot existed because he'd never needed them. Deeds, statements, operating agreements. I downloaded copies and backed them up twice. Then I photographed the physical files in the office. One by one, calm and methodical. At 7:30, I woke my daughter and took her to school like it was any other weekday. I kissed her forehead, told her I loved her, and watched her walk inside without looking back. When I returned to the car, my hands were steady on the steering wheel. Whatever I did next had to protect her first. I called a lawyer before 9. I didn't cry on the phone. I didn't give a dramatic backstory. I asked precise questions and took notes. By the time I hung up, I knew exactly what my rights were, and how quickly they could disappear if I hesitated. I drove to the bank next. The one I'd helped choose years earlier because it had better corporate protections. I didn't close accounts. I froze them. Joint signatures only. No transfers without consent. The teller asked if everything was all right. I smiled and said yes. It wasn't a lie. Everything was aligning. When I got home, my husband was pacing the living room, phone in hand. We need to talk, he said. We already did, I replied, passing him without slowing. I packed only what mattered. Clothes for me and my daughter, her school things, documents, sentimental items he wouldn't recognize the value of. I left the rest exactly where it was. Let him sit in the life he'd fractured. He followed me from room to room, voice rising and falling as he tried different tactics. You're overreacting. This isn't what you think. We can fix this. I didn't answer. Silence unsettles liars more than anger ever does. By noon, I'd changed my passwords. All of them. Email, banking, cloud storage, social accounts. I enabled two-factor authentication on everything he'd ever had access to. I removed him as an admin from systems he didn't even realize I managed. At one, I called a real estate agent, a woman I trusted, someone discreet. I want a valuation, I said, quietly. She didn't ask why. She just said when. At 2, I forwarded a single email to my lawyer. The photo my sister had taken, time-stamped and clear. Evidence doesn't need commentary. When my husband realized the accounts were frozen, his composure cracked. What did you do? He asked, panic bleeding through his voice. I protected myself, I said. Something you forgot to do for me. He stared at me like I'd become a stranger. Maybe I had. By late afternoon, he was calling his partners, his parents. Anyone who might still answer. I could hear his voice through the walls, confused, defensive, already trying to control the narrative. I took my daughter to stay with my sister that night. I told her it was temporary. She nodded, too perceptive to argue. Before I left, I placed my wedding ring on the kitchen counter. Not thrown, not dramatic, just placed. "This doesn't have to be a war," he said, standing in the doorway. "It already is," I replied. "You just don't know the rules yet." As I drove away, my phone buzzed again and again. I didn't answer. I didn't block him either. I wanted the messages. I wanted the record. By the time he understood that I wasn't bluffing, I was already steps ahead. The victim phase was over. Now I was moving. And nothing he said could catch up to what I'd already set in motion. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They unfolded the way pressure does, quiet at first, then undeniable. The first sign was money. My husband called me that morning, voice tight, trying to sound casual. "There's an issue with the account," he said. "The card didn't go through." I let a beat pass. "That's strange. What did you do?" he asked. "I didn't do anything," I replied truthfully. "I just made sure nothing could be done without both of us." Silence. Then a sharper edge. "You can't just lock me out." "I didn't lock you out," I said. "I locked us in." He hung up. By noon, I heard from one of his partners. A carefully worded message asking if everything was okay, mentioning delays, saying they'd circle back later. That's how professional concern sounds when it's trying not to panic. The ripple spread fast. Deals don't like uncertainty. Investors don't like surprises. And men who build their confidence on momentum don't do well when everything suddenly stalls. That afternoon, the woman from the party, the one he'd toasted, finally reached out. Her message was polite, almost nervous. "I'm so sorry if there was a misunderstanding. I had no idea." I didn't respond. I forwarded it to my lawyer. By the next day, she was being removed from projects, not fired, just quietly excluded. Meetings rescheduled without her, invitations lost. No one wanted proximity to a situation that smelled unstable. People don't pick sides loudly. They drift. Friends started calling me instead of him. Not to ask questions, just to check in, to feel out where I stood. Some were awkward. Some were sincere. All of them noticed that I wasn't spiraling. That unsettled them more than tears would have. At my sister's house, my daughter watched cartoons while I took calls in another room. I made sure she didn't hear names, accusations, or bitterness. Children don't need details. They need consistency. Meanwhile, his messages piled up. "Please talk to me. You're blowing this up. We can handle this privately." Privately. That word always comes out when someone realizes exposure is imminent. By the third day, his tone shifted. "I can't access payroll," he said in a voicemail. "This is serious." I listened once. I saved it. I didn't reply. That evening, a mutual friend let something slip. "He's been asking if you're planning to leave town," she said carefully. "He seems worried." Good. The mistress, if that's what she was, stopped posting online. Her accounts went quiet. Her name stopped coming up in conversation. When people asked about her, others shrugged. Distance is a language. On the fourth day, his mother called me. "I don't know what's happening," she said, voice tight with disappointment. "But this isn't like him." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was familiar. How many times had I said that to myself? "I'm handling it," I told her. "And my daughter is safe." That mattered more to her than anything else. That night, my husband showed up at my sister's house unannounced. I didn't open the door. He stood on the porch, hands in his pockets, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. "We need to fix this," he said through the glass. "You're hurting a lot of people." I stepped close enough for him to hear me without raising my voice. "You hurt us," I said. "I'm just not hiding it for you anymore." His face fell, not in guilt, but in fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of not knowing what came next. As he walked back to his car, I felt it clearly for the first time. The balance had shifted. He was reacting. I was directing. And tomorrow, he was going to try harder. I knew that, because men who lose power don't go quietly. They reach. The second confrontation didn't happen by accident. Nothing at that stage did. It took place at a charity luncheon my husband had helped sponsor for years, an annual event in a hotel ballroom downtown, polished and predictable, filled with people who believed they were attending something respectable, board members, local business leaders, a few journalists circling for quotes, the kind of room where reputation mattered more than truth until truth arrived anyway. I showed up on time, not early, not late, calm, composed, dressed like a woman who had nothing to explain. My husband was already there, pacing near the front, phone glued to his hand. When he saw me, relief flashed across his face so quickly it almost looked like hope. He stepped toward me. "Thank you for coming," he said under his breath. "We can talk privately." "No," I said gently. "We can talk here." The program had already started. A moderator stood at the podium, thanking sponsors, reading names off a screen. When my husband's name came up, the room applauded out of habit. He smiled reflexively. It looked painful. Then the moderator announced a short donor acknowledgement segment. Open mic, brief remarks. My husband leaned toward me. "Please don't do this." I smiled back. "You already did." I walked to the podium before he could stop me. The room quieted. People recognized me, the wife, the constant presence behind the scenes, the woman who always smiled, always supported. "Good afternoon," I said into the microphone. My voice didn't shake. "I won't take much of your time." My husband stood frozen, color draining from his face. "I want to thank this organization," I continued, "for reminding me how important transparency is, especially when money, trust, and public image intersect." A murmur moved through the crowd. "I've spent 12 years helping build what you see today," I said. "And recently I learned, along with many of you, that loyalty was being publicly redirected without my knowledge or consent." People shifted in their seats. Phones lifted, not discreetly this time. "I won't discuss personal matters in detail," I added. "But I will say this. If you're ever wondering who stands beside you when things get hard, make sure you're not thanking the wrong person." Silence. My husband tried to step forward. The moderator hesitated, unsure whether to intervene. I held up one finger. "One more thing," I said. I reached into my bag and placed a single envelope on the podium. "This contains documentation that will soon be part of a legal process," I said calmly. "I won't share it here. But I will say that integrity isn't something you borrow, and once it's spent, it doesn't come back." I turned and walked away. Behind me, chaos erupted softly, whispers colliding, chairs shifting, someone asking if the event should continue. My husband stood alone near the podium, exposed, blinking like a man waking up in the wrong room. As I reached the back of the ballroom, I saw her. The woman from the toast. She stood near the wall, arms crossed tightly, eyes wide. When our gazes met, she looked away first. She didn't follow him. She didn't approach me. She simply picked up her purse and left. That was the moment he understood. Not when I spoke, not when the room turned, but when she chose distance over defense. By the time I reached the elevator, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Messages, missed calls. Panic dressed up as apology. I didn't answer. The doors closed, sealing me in silence again. But this time, it felt earned. Upstairs, applause resumed awkwardly. The event limped forward, but something had shifted permanently. His name would never land the same way again, and everyone in that room knew it. He tried to get ahead of it. That was his first mistake. 2 days after the luncheon, a carefully worded statement appeared on his social media. Neutral colors, professional headshot, language scrubbed clean of responsibility. "I'm going through a difficult personal situation. I ask for privacy as we work through this respectfully. Respectfully. Privacy. The usual shield. Within an hour, comments started appearing. At first, supportive. Then curious. Then pointed. People don't like vagueness when they feel misled. By that afternoon, he was calling mutual contacts, asking them to clarify misunderstandings. He framed it as a marriage issue, a rough patch. He never mentioned the toast, never mentioned the woman, never mentioned money. That was his second mistake. Because I wasn't posting anything. I wasn't arguing. I wasn't correcting him publicly. I was letting the silence grow heavy enough to notice. The receipts didn't come from me directly. They came from reality catching up. A former assistant shared a screenshot. An email thread where schedules overlapped in ways that couldn't be explained. A business acquaintance posted a photo from a conference months earlier, tagging both of them with a caption that suddenly looked different in context. Someone else noticed timelines, dates, overlaps. By evening, a hashtag appeared. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't obscene. It was factual. People started sharing stories about professional loyalty and blurred boundaries, about spouses quietly erased, about men thanking the wrong woman because they assumed no one would question it. My husband tried to respond, then deleted his replies. Each deletion made things worse. The woman he'd chosen went private completely. Her profile vanished. Her company bio was updated. Her role suddenly consultant instead of project lead. The distancing was obvious. His partners weren't so lucky. A deal paused, then another. An investor requested an audit. Someone asked whether company funds had been used for personal travel. No one accused. They just asked questions. Questions are dangerous when you don't control the answers. He showed up at my sister's house again, unannounced, eyes bloodshot, voice tight. "This is getting out of hand," he said. "You need to make it stop." I crossed my arms. "I haven't started anything." "You know what I mean." "Yes," I said. "I do." He looked at me then, really looked, like he was trying to find the version of me that used to smooth things over. "You're ruining me," he said. "No," I replied. "I stopped protecting you." That night, a local business blog published a short piece about ethics and optics in real estate leadership. No names in the headline, plenty in the comments. By morning, the story had jumped platforms. He tried one last pivot, a longer post, apologetic, but vague. He admitted to poor judgment without admitting to anything specific. He praised my strength. He said he was committed to learning. The backlash doubled. People don't want half confessions. They want coherence. By the end of the week, his credibility was gone. Not destroyed in a dramatic explosion. Eroded, quietly, professionally. Invitations stopped. Calls went unanswered. A speaking engagement was postponed indefinitely. At school pickup, another mother squeezed my hand and said nothing. She didn't need to. At night, I read through the messages he kept sending. The tone had changed again. Less anger, more pleading. "Please, this isn't who I am. I made mistakes. You're the only one who can help me fix this." That was his final mistake. Because exposure doesn't destroy people, it reveals them. And once revealed, there's no undoing it. I didn't respond. I didn't block him. I let the world finish what he started. By the time he realized the narrative was no longer his to manage, it was already over. The man who had once commanded rooms was now a cautionary tale passed quietly between people who valued stability over charm. And I was done escalating. The collapse was doing that on its own. The legal phase didn't feel dramatic. It felt surgical. Once the narrative collapsed, the paperwork moved fast. My lawyer filed first. Clean, controlled, precise. Infidelity documented. Financial overlap flagged. Asset protection initiated before emotion could contaminate strategy. The advantage wasn't revenge. It was preparation. My husband finally understood that this wasn't a disagreement anymore. It was a dismantling. The accounts stayed frozen. Temporary orders granted joint oversight, which in practice meant he had to ask. For everything: payroll, travel, even personal expenses over a set amount. The man who once moved money with a phone call now needed approval. He hated that most. The house appraisal came back higher than he expected. So did the valuation on the company, higher than he wanted disclosed. Numbers don't lie, and in court, they speak louder than charm. The judge didn't care about his reputation or his stress or his apologies. The judge cared about records. I got primary custody without a fight. There was nothing to contest. My daughter's routine, my involvement, his absences. The timeline told its own story. When he tried to argue for appearances, his own messages were used against him: missed pickups, broken promises, late-night explanations that contradicted one another. The courtroom stayed quiet as they were read aloud. He didn't look at me once. His family fractured next. His father stopped returning his calls after the financial disclosures surfaced. Not out of anger, but embarrassment. The kind that creates distance rather than confrontation. His mother called me again, voice heavy, and asked if she could still see her granddaughter. "Yes," I said. "That's between you and her." That was more grace than he'd earned. His brother withdrew a loan he'd quietly been extending. No warning. Just a message that said it was time to focus on his own family. Support evaporates quickly when the risk becomes personal. The woman he'd chosen disappeared completely once the money dried up. Her name came up briefly during proceedings, then vanished. She wasn't subpoenaed. She wasn't defended. She simply stopped answering his calls and removed herself from the fallout she hadn't planned to inherit. By the time the settlement was finalized, the outcome was clear. I kept the house. I kept my retirement. I kept majority custody. I kept control. He kept what remained of the company, but stripped of liquidity, credibility, and allies. Properties sold under pressure don't fetch premium prices. Deals negotiated in desperation don't favor the desperate. He moved out of the house quietly. No dramatic exit. Just boxes loaded into a rental truck one afternoon while neighbors pretended not to notice. I watched from the window with my daughter beside me. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need answers. "He looks smaller," she said. I nodded. "He is." The last time I saw him in person was outside the courthouse. Papers signed. Terms sealed. He lingered like he expected something more. "This didn't have to be like this," he said. "Yes," I replied. "It did." Because consequences aren't cruel, they're corrective. As I walked away, I felt nothing sharp. No triumph, no satisfaction, just relief. The kind that comes when a weight you didn't realize you were carrying finally drops. The marriage was over. The illusion was gone. And the man who once stood at the center of everything was now on the edge of his own life, unsure where to step next. I didn't look back. Some chapters don't deserve rereading. The last time we met, it wasn't dramatic. No raised voices, no witnesses, no stage. Just a quiet weekday afternoon in a nearly empty cafe halfway between the courthouse and the life I was rebuilding. He asked to meet. I agreed, not because I owed him anything, but because unfinished conversations have a way of lingering if you don't end them cleanly. He was already there when I arrived, sitting stiffly with a coffee he hadn't touched. He looked older than he had months earlier. Not ruined, just reduced. The kind of man who had learned, too late, that certainty isn't permanent. I sat across from him and placed my phone face down on the table. He noticed. He always noticed control. "Thank you for coming," he said. I didn't respond. He cleared his throat. "I won't take much of your time." "You already have," I said calmly. That landed harder than shouting ever could. He nodded, absorbing it. I needed to see you, to talk. Without lawyers, without everything else." "There is no without everything else," I replied. "That is our reality now." He rubbed his hands together, a nervous habit he never had before. "I've lost a lot." I met his eyes for the first time. "You lost what you gambled." He flinched like I'd struck something exposed. I made mistakes, he said quickly. I know that. I've owned that. I'm paying for it. No, I corrected gently. You're experiencing it. There's a difference. He leaned forward. I never meant to humiliate you. And yet, I said. You held a microphone. Silence stretched between us. He looked down at the table like it might offer answers. I was selfish, he admitted. I thought I could manage everything, that I could keep parts of my life separate. I nodded. You didn't just betray me. You assumed I wouldn't notice. He swallowed. I underestimated you. Yes, I said. You did. That truth sat between us, undeniable. He tried again, softer this time. We were good once. We were functional, I replied, because I made sure of it. His face tightened. That's not fair. It's accurate. I took a slow breath, not because I needed to calm down, but because precision matters in final conversations. I built stability so you could chase expansion, I continued. I absorbed uncertainty so you could feel confident. And the moment you believed you didn't need me, you replaced me. I didn't replace you, he said quickly. You thanked someone else for standing by you, I interrupted. Publicly, in front of our child. He closed his eyes. That moment, I said, ended everything. Not the affair, not the lies. That moment. He nodded again, defeated. I know. No, I said quietly. You understand now. Knowing would have changed your behavior then. He looked at me, desperation creeping in. What do you want from me? I leaned back slightly, creating space where expectation used to live. Nothing, I said. He blinked. Nothing? No explanations, no apologies, no redemption arc. I don't need closure from you. I created my own. His voice cracked. I still love you. I held his gaze, steady and unflinching. Love that arrives after consequences isn't love. It's fear. That was the moment he broke. Not loudly, not visibly, but internally. I saw it in the way his shoulders sagged, the way he stopped trying to negotiate. I don't know who I am without you, he said. That, I replied, is not my responsibility. The waitress approached with the check. I reached for my bag. I'll pay, he said quickly, reflexively. No, I said. This is the last thing you don't get to do for me. I stood. He looked up at me like a man searching for a final opening. Is there really no chance? Not even someday? I paused, not for his sake, but for mine. Someday, I said. This won't hurt anymore, but that day won't include you. I picked up my bag and turned toward the door. Elise, he said softly. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. This is where you stop following me, I said. In life, in memory, in imagination. Then I walked out. The bell over the cafe door chimed once behind me, sealing the moment shut. Outside, the air felt lighter. The sky looked wider. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. Some endings don't explode. They close. Time didn't rush in to save me. It arrived slowly, like it wanted to make sure I was ready for it. The first few weeks after everything ended were quiet in a way I'd never experienced before. No tension humming in the background. No monitoring someone else's moods. No bracing myself for conversations that never quite landed where they should. Just space. At first, the silence felt unfamiliar. Then it felt earned. I moved my daughter back home once the house felt like ours again. Not the version curated for guests or investors, but the real one. We repainted her room together. I let her choose colors I would have once overruled for resale value. She laughed more, slept better. Children don't need perfection. They need peace. I rebuilt my work on my terms. Not as support, not as background, as lead. Clients came through referrals quietly at first, then steadily. People who'd always trusted my judgment but hadn't known where to place it before now knew exactly where to find me. Independence doesn't announce itself. It proves itself. Mornings became mine. I drank coffee without checking my phone. I walked my daughter to school without rushing. I stopped apologizing for being direct, decisive, uninterested in small talk that led nowhere. Strength didn't arrive all at once either. It layered itself, in boundaries, in routines, in the absence of chaos. Every once in a while someone mentioned him, a mutual contact, a passing update. I never asked follow-up questions. From what I gathered, his life had narrowed. Smaller apartment, fewer calls, less certainty. Not dramatic, just diminished. The kind of outcome no one celebrates but everyone understands. He didn't disappear. He just stopped mattering. My daughter asked about him less as time passed. When she did, I answered honestly, without bitterness. People make choices, I told her once. And then they live with them. She nodded. That was enough. On the anniversary of that New Year's Eve, we stayed in. No parties, no countdown. We cooked dinner together and watched a movie we'd already seen 3 times. At midnight, I hugged her and felt nothing sharp in my chest. Just gratitude. That was how I knew I was free. I didn't become harder. I became clearer. I learned the difference between love and labor, between loyalty and erasure, between partnership and performance. I learned that being chosen loudly means nothing if you're dismissed quietly. Most of all, I learned that betrayal doesn't define the person who's betrayed. It exposes the person who commits it. I don't carry anger with me anymore. Anger requires attachment. I released that when I stopped needing him to understand anything at all. My life now isn't louder. It's deeper. It fits. Sometimes I catch my reflection in windows as I walk through the city. Head up, shoulders relaxed, eyes forward. And I recognize myself again. Not the woman who waited. Not the woman who absorbed. The woman who decided. The truth is, the toast that ended my marriage also ended my tolerance for anything that required me to shrink. He thanked the wrong woman that night. And in doing so, he gave me back to myself. That was the last gift he ever gave me, and it was enough. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. If it moved you, surprised you, or made you feel seen, click the hype button. It really helps this channel reach people who need these stories too. I'd love to hear your thoughts, or even your own experience, in the comments below. And if you haven't yet, hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Your support means more than you know. Until next time, take care of yourself.